Hello, everybody. Today on The Best Boss, I'm honored to welcome Dr. Katherine Meese. She's a nationally recognized expert in organizational behavior who's actually helping to reshape the future of healthcare leadership. Katherine's on a mission to help use science to help healthcare leaders keep their people and actually keep them well. She's the co-author of The Human Margin, Building the Foundations of Trust with Quint Studer. And it's a powerful guide for creating trust-filled cultures that truly support their people. As she reminds us, no humans, no margin, no mission. Her upcoming book, Genfluence, Igniting Intergenerational Impact, is already generating buzz. And Katherine, welcome to The Best Boss, and I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a joy to be with you.
Thank you. Katherine, in The Human Margin, you and Quint Studer really talk about trust as foundational to not only performance with well-being. And on this podcast, we talk about the best boss. And what we found is that trust is one of the top 5 components in best bosses. And talk to me a little bit about trust and why is it important? And then we'll talk about what leaders can do to build it in their teams.
Certainly. So during the pandemic, I started researching healthcare workers and wanted to understand, how do we keep people within our organizations? How do we keep them within the industry? And how do we keep them well? And what I didn't expect is sort of the outsized contribution of trust in senior leadership in affecting some of those metrics that we're interested in, like turnover and net promoter score. I've always thought about, it's the manager. There's a whole book called It's the Manager, and we tend to think a lot about your direct supervisor or boss. And at the same time, what we were seeing in the results was very different, that the people at the top and whether or not they're trusted have a huge impact on people's desire to stay within an organization. So that really got me started down this research path and understanding trust. And essentially what we know is that it's really important and it's really hard to do, and it's so multifaceted. One of the things that is surprising to me about the research is that so much of that trust equation does not have anything to do with that senior leader's behaviors. It's about how it's managed at every level of the organization.
Give me an example.
Right. So I think a lot of senior leaders think about their own behavior as it relates to trust. Am I honest? Do I own my mistakes? Am I competent in my job? But what we see when we look at the data and the research is that there are wide variations in leader trust for people who report to the same senior leader. And so if it was only about that person's behaviors, we may not expect to see that level of variation. We would expect some consistency.
Because it's the same behavior that everybody's witnessing.
That's right. And so we started to do some more digging on this in a research perspective. And what we've identified is that there are actually sort of 3 factors that explain a lot of that variation in trust in senior leadership. And it's not necessarily the senior leader's behaviors. So the top 3 are satisfaction with the job performed by the manager above my direct supervisor. So my one-up's one up.
Wow.
If that person's not doing a good job, then I'm probably going to blame the senior leader that put them in place, right? Why did you put someone here that doesn't belong here? 2 is manager communication of organizational goals. So is my boss able to communicate what the organization is doing and where they're going? Sometimes we think that's the job of the senior leader, right? To send all that communication out, but really whether the manager can convey that in that daily relationship.
In actions or words, I like what you said, daily relationship. It's not just the town hall or the staff meeting.
That's right. And I think it's helping be a sense-making partner for people, right? How do I align what you're seeing in your day-to-day work to what's going on more broadly in the organization?
I'm reminded of one of my leaders who he so firmly believes in the pillars of where he works. He actually continuously brings back any of the initiatives, mandates, even the numbers and the matrices and the MORs. He always comes back to the pillars, and the pillars are from his boss's boss.
Exactly.
And so, but it's more than just words. He actually shows how the choices he makes impacts that.
And I think that's so helpful. The third thing is sort of related, but it's the idea that different work groups or units are collaborating well together to accomplish shared objectives. So if I feel like my leader can't play nicely with other leaders, I'm going to blame the senior leader that put those 2 groups in place. So collectively, these things together lead to sort of what we would call a middle management trust gap, where we're seeing a gap in whether or not people believe in and trust their senior leaders that is separate perhaps from their own behaviors. And Diane, it looks a little something like this. I get a hard question from somebody that I supervise, and I don't know how to answer it. And I have to maintain that relationship in real time. And so my answer is to throw senior leadership under the bus. So it might go something like, I asked for your raise, but those greedy, evil people upstairs, said no. When we do that, ultimately, we are creating an expectation for people that they work in an environment that's led by greedy, evil people. And ultimately, they don't feel safe there, they leave.
It's almost like when you're watching when you're hearing a parent disagree with another parent, it doesn't feel good.
No, it doesn't feel good. And, I want to go to the grocery store with that really nice embroidered soft shell jacket that healthcare organizations buy. And I want to feel really proud of the logo that's there. And if I think the people at the top are not having my best interest at heart, I'm not going to feel proud.
I've done research with trust before. Is there a way to rebuild it once it's lost?
I think we have to get really good at apologizing and forgiveness as a core leadership competency. The great news is that we know that the data is on our side. The act of apologizing and forgiving is good for both the forgiven and the forgiver. It restores our sense of humanity, and it leads to better organizational performance, job satisfaction, productivity, and innovation. So there's every reason to get good at doing that. I think I've also seen particularly in healthcare, that sometimes we just are moving so fast. We hope if we keep moving on that people will forget. And I can also tell you, after reading thousands upon thousands of pages of employee comments as I help organizations with their employee engagement measurement, that there are things that just hang on like a barnacle. There's that thing that Janice did in 2014 and it's still with us. And so it's not going to resolve.
Yeah, the memories of an elephant and back. Do you remember that one Christmas when when was that? Like 19,
And we're still hearing about it.
We're still hearing about it. Okay, so I'm the boss of people, and I understand that this is multifaceted. I understand the importance of showing cohesion with other departments, showing alignment and cohesion with other departments verbally to the people that I lead. What else do I do? Like, how do you see it? Give me advice. What do I do?
I'll tell you about two things that I think are maybe less top of mind for people when they're thinking about building trust. One is setting extremely clear expectations for the people that report to you. Because if I violate an expectation, and as a result of violating that expectation, there's a disciplinary action, I'm embarrassed in front of my peers, or I do a bad job, which most people don't want to do a bad job at their job, I'm going to blame you for not making that clear to me. And I have seen, particularly sort of in the post-pandemic era, as work changed overnight, that some organizations have not gone back through that process of making their team norms crystal clear. Or you'll hear things like, well, this is basic professionalism, I shouldn't have to say it. People were at home for 2 years barefoot. Yes, we do have to say it. We have to reestablish those expectations. So that's thing one that I think about. The second part of that is making sure that the leaders we're selecting, we're developing for competence. When people retired early during COVID, it sort of created this upward suction into leadership. And a lot of those people in leadership roles now have less training and development than we've seen historically. And so if they can't do a good job, it's going to be very hard to build that trust relationship.
So I don't know too many leaders who were trained in leadership. They were good nurses, good pharmacists, good physicians, and they promoted without development first, or even a pathway. I was joking with one of the physicians that I coached yesterday. I'm like, do you remember in medical school where they taught you leadership? He's a new division chair, and he's looked at me and he's like, I think we had an hour lecture. And I was joking because I knew the answer for that. People are hungry for that development, and they don't quite know what to do with it.
I will tell you, I'm a firm believer in healthcare that nobody wants to do a bad job. People go into this because they care deeply. And so I think also many organizations that were financially constrained during the pandemic pumped the brakes on a lot of their development pathways. And so I've had the same experience that people are hungry for the tools because they want to do a great job.
Yeah. And actually, during the pandemic, more people received coaching from me than at any other time. It was almost the opposite with the leadership. They knew that they needed something. And so that was interesting to see that type of push for leadership coaching in healthcare. How do you measure? What's the best way to measure trust? How do you know if it's working?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I think most people, whether or not they could describe it this way, would say trust is sort of, it's a feeling in many ways that's made up of a lot of different things. A question that the VA uses and has used for many years is senior leaders have honesty and integrity. You can also ask people directly, do I trust my senior leadership? Do you trust the senior leadership of the organization? Most people will have their own definition of trust. What's more important is to understand whether they believe that they trust senior leadership, not necessarily that we have the exact same shared definition.
That's really interesting because most people are saying, okay, this is what I mean by trust. It's like, well, if it doesn't resonate with the people, you've almost lost them.
Right. But I think probably the more important piece is my definition of trust. If that's not met, that's where we start to see the negative effects within the organization. And so allowing people to self-define that, it's really, whether it's there or not, that is problematic.
It's interesting. It's meeting somebody where they're at versus telling them where they're at.
Right.
This is what trust means. And then doesn't really resonate, matter, or evoke honesty. If I can ask you about genfluence rather quickly, give me a thumbnail sketch on what genfluence is.
Yeah, so I'm hearing from a lot of leaders when I'm doing this work around the country that they're sort of baffled about what to do, particularly with younger generations in the workforce. We know that there are some things in the research that are substantially different about younger generations. And we also know that there are a lot of things that aren't different that people perceive to be different. And so I'm seeing leaders struggle with how to adapt their leadership to maybe some different expectations in the workforce. I also think there are some changes around an increased desire for transparency. Maybe people who haven't had as much work experience once they come into the organization, because we know there are lower rates of high schoolers getting paid jobs, for example. And so the reason that we're writing this book is because we want to equip leaders to design around the reality of some of these differences rather than bemoaning them, so that they can access the great parts of that diversity in the workplace.
It's really exciting work. I can't wait for the book to come out. And it will be on Amazon, I assume?
It will be on Amazon, and you can also purchase, I believe, through ACHE, which is our publisher.
ACHE and an advanced copy. Advances are always great to be able to get. I have a final question. Tell me about your best boss.
So I have had so many good bosses, which I feel so fortunate about. But the person that immediately came to mind is the late Chuck Stokes. He was a very seasoned executive in healthcare and spent a year as the chair of the UAB Department of Health Services Administration, where I worked. And Chuck was my best boss for a few reasons that sometimes are hard to put into words. One, he modeled the type of leader that I would love to be someday. And it was just so evident. You could see it in the way he carried himself, the way he interacted with people, his very wise, but also gentle demeanor. Two, he made people believe that they could do anything, and he gave them the support to do that. I have never felt so capable as when I worked for Chuck, because he would bring out things that I didn't even see in myself. And what's interesting is that after he passed away, unfortunately, very suddenly, people crawled out of the woodwork nationally to talk about how he had made such a big impact in their lives. And I will tell you, I thought I was special, right? And then it turns out everybody was special to him because he invested so much of his life and energy in mentoring and building others.
I received many comments from people who I didn't even know knew Chuck Stokes. And your comment about he saw something in me that I didn't know I had in myself. Number one in best boss characteristic of all the thousands of people we're interviewing and even talking on the street, it's number one. They believed in me. They saw something in me, usually at an early age too, early in your career. So, I think quite a lot about Chuck and the people's lives that he touched. And and the fact that he was able to rise to the head of an organization and be a best boss, which is also kind of rare, so yeah. So I thank you for sharing with us. And Katherine, Dr. Meese, I really appreciate your willingness to share in the book that you and Quint Studer wrote together, outlining that trust piece and what organizations can do. I highly recommend it. It's a great read and it's captivating. And what I like about it a lot is, okay, I get it. Now what do I do? It's more pragmatic versus preachy.
Thank you. We really wanted to give leaders real tools that they can do from anywhere they sit in the organization that are largely free. Because if we come at people with things that you have to wait for senior leadership, you have to have money, it's just not doable in healthcare right now.
Doable. So great. Thank you so much. And this is the Best Boss Podcast with Dr. Katherine Meese. Thank you so much. And we'll see you next time.
It's a pleasure.